That is how I long to be. Here, oh Lord, my earnest plea. Let me be more like you and less like me. More like you and less like me. That is how I long to be. Here, oh Lord, my earnest plea. Let me be more like you and less like me. And someday, Lord, I'll know more like you and less like me.
Well, here Richie was saying he couldn't hardly wait to get started teaching Sunday school up here, and I'm about so nervous I can't get started. But I do appreciate the chance to be able to come up here and speak. I appreciate our pastor. I appreciate his confidence that he has to ask men to come up here and speak. That means a lot to me because I hold him in high regard. It means a lot to stand behind this pulpit too. I didn't really realize how many people had preached behind here. And it's a high honor, and I don't take it lightly. I know I won't do it justice, and I know I won't do nowhere near as good as most of everybody that's preached behind here. But I do want to do what I can do. When the pastor asked me to speak on Sunday, I agreed to it pretty quickly, and I don't know, I wanted to do it, but I was really nervous too. I should have known that something was coming because Saturday evening I started having vertigo, and I was dizzy, I couldn't stand up. And that had happened one other time, right before we went down to Myrtle, Mississippi. I got vertigo real bad for a couple days to me, but I didn't really think about it at the time. And to be honest, when he asked me to speak, after I agreed to it, I thought, well, maybe I should have just came Sunday morning and he could ask me then, and I'd had a few more hours to prepare. And then I thought, well, maybe I should have just stayed home Sunday night, and then I wouldn't have had to prepare. But I am glad to be up here. Let me go to the Lord in prayer before we get started. Lord, I pray that you would help me to be able to convey what I have to say, Lord. I pray that you would use every word. Lord, don't let me say anything that wouldn't I ask that you help this to be a help to someone. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I really do find it amazing that I'm here, and not just up here, but in this church. Because it's a long ways from our house to here. And I would have probably never even thought about driving this far to go to church. And everyone who asks about where we go to church and why we drive so far, they think we're crazy for coming up here. They ask, is this place so special that you have to pass all those churches to get to this one? And it is. And it's, I've really, looking back at ideas. I mean, it's against all odds. And I grew up in church, and the church that we went to, we used to live right beside of it. And so we literally would walk through. It took us no time to get there. And Mom always took us to church, took me and my sister. And he would always say that he would go to church. You know, he believed in going to church, and he liked to talk about the Bible some, but he never would go to that church. And if you knew Dad, then you knew he always had a knack for picking up. He could read people. He could pick up things that a lot of people couldn't pick up. And I don't think he liked that preacher that preached at that church too much. But he did have a respect for pastors, preachers, especially men that he thought was really called. And so me and my mom and my sister, we went to that church for a good long time. Church, you know, I did learn a lot there. I grew up there, you know. Almost everything that I knew about the Bible come either from Mom teaching us or from going to church there. And so the people were good people. They really, and maybe I was just missing a lot of it, and you know, maybe it was more me than it was anybody else that was there. But we went through a couple preachers there, and the preacher that we had right before we left and came up here, I honestly believe that he had everyone's best intentions in mind. And Dad did like him pretty good. And he didn't come too many times. I think he did come one time and hear him preach. But they had conversations outside of church, and Dad did have respect for that man. And I think Dad is really he is the key to everything about us coming here. I mean, I know God is the key to all of it, but I know we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Dad. And if he would have went to that church and just sat there on the pew with us, none of us would have been here. I don't know how it would have turned out. Like I said, Dad didn't go to church with us, but he listened to a lot of preaching. He had a respect for preachers. He had a very high respect for God and the men of God. And I remember he used to have cassette tapes in the car. We'd listen to preaching quite a bit, and usually it was some old preacher, and the audio was really bad, and it was crackly, and the preacher would get loud, and it would distort his voice, and it was a little bit hard to listen to sometimes. But they were true men of God. I remember he had a whole collection of Oliver B. Green tapes. We'd carry that thing around in the car, and it looked like a really big book. When you opened it up, and it had like maybe 10 cassette tapes on each side, and had a leaf in the middle. I bet there was 30 or 40 cassette tapes in there. And he listened to them all. We listened to them when we went to my grandparents a lot. Because we went to two of my grandparents every Sunday. We always went there. And a lot of times Dad would put on a sermon. And a lot of times it was from Oliver B. Green. And he'd also listen to Gospel 9 on the radio. And I think for a while he didn't really want too many people to know that that's what he was listening to. Because when I was real little, he'd always have country music on in the truck. And then every once in a while you get in, and it'd be on the AM side, and it'd be on Gospel 9. But I think that's sort of how he got to know Donnie South that used to go here. Because they worked together on a few job sites, and Donnie would always have his radio on. He'd always have it on preaching. And Dad take note of that. He'd talk to him and ask him questions, and Donnie invited him to come up here. And Dad'd say, well, I'd go to church if I could find a good church. And it's hard to find a preacher that I could sit under. And Donnie would invite him to come up here, and he would tell him, the church that I go to it's different. You'll probably like it. You just need to come try it out. Dad would say he was real big on it. He said, I can't sit under a man that's been married 2 or 3 times. Something like that. Just you need to come up here and try it out. Dad would say, well, I can't sit under someone who's a wimp and just won't tell you like it is. Now, I got to have it straight if I'm going to have it. I got to have it straight. And if he would have known what he was going to come into up here, I don't think he would have worried about that. And Dad would always tell him, I don't know, I might come by one Wednesday night, but I can't make you any promises. I remember him telling that a few times, and that's what it is. Oh, it was always a Wednesday. I might come by a Wednesday night. And eventually we did come up here, and I was probably maybe 8 or 10 years old. But I remember coming up here, and we came a few times after that, but it was not very often. We'd sneak in on a Wednesday night, and we'd sit there and hear the message. And I remember Dad told me one time that even though he didn't come very often, our pastor would always greet him by name. And it made a big impact on him. That someone would remember him. And I know probably the reason he was remembering him because he probably called his name out many times when he wasn't here. One thing that I thought was pretty amazing is even though we didn't go to church here and we live like 45 minutes away from here, is we started doing a lot of stuff in this area. Like Dad would take me hunting and we would go up off Brown Mountain Beach Road over near Playmore Beach. And every time we went there, we'd pass this caution light out here within 2 miles of here. And then when we'd hunt there on that road, if you drive all the way to the end of that dirt road, it'll bring you back out on 90, and we'd come down through Collinsville. We'd come right by where me and Mom and Kelly all got baptized. And we drove by that a bunch of times. And we're not even from anywhere close to here, but it seemed like God was pushing us this way. And then one summer, me and Dad helped one of our friends at Beach Mountain. We helped him at his cabin up there. And we'd go up 181. Every weekend we'd go up there and help him. And we were just about a mile from where Camp Victory's at now. And I think if I hadn't been so familiar with that area and driving up through there, I don't know that we'd have went every night, or probably not any nights, whenever they had that camp meeting up there. And if we hadn't have been up there, and some of those nights when, God was just everywhere, that changed our family's life. And so I think it's, when you look back and you can see the providence of God moving you to a place, pointing you towards something, that just amazes me. I mean, when it's happening, you don't think about it. It's just things that you wanted to do. You chose these things. And I'm sure you do choose these things, but you're not the driving force behind choosing them. It's like the preacher always says, the Lord's in the setup game. I mean, He sets us all up. And then Joby Borders gave Dad a book about Camp Zion, about Percy Ray. And Dad let me borrow that book, and I read it. And I don't think, if I hadn't read that book, I don't think we went to camp down to Myrtle, down to Camp Zion. And so I think just all these seemingly random things that come and they point us all one direction. If it seems like the whole universe is pointing you in one direction, maybe that's the direction you need to go in. Mom and Dad started going here on Sunday nights, and they had Tuesday night service then. And so they would come every Sunday night and Tuesday night here, and me and Mom and Kelly would go. We only had Sunday morning service at the church we went to, and so we would go Sunday morning service there, and we'd go Wednesday night service there. And after the last pastor that we had there resigned, I just really felt it was time that we needed to move on somewhere else. I mean, like I say, those are good people there. I don't think anything bad about them, but it was just something about that it seemed to be a good time to break away from there, and I felt like I needed to. And so we started coming up here in, I think it was 2015. Yeah, I know it was 2015 because Kelly was pregnant with Emma when we came up here. And so it was a lot of change for us, and there was a lot of things going on. We'd been married a little while, but we'd still basically newlyweds. And Kelly was pregnant, was going to have a kid, and we're changing churches. So it was a lot to take in. And then we came up here, and I had been around some pretty good preaching, and especially the church that Mom grew up in. I remember a lot of preachers up there. It was in the mountains, so it was mountain preaching. And so I was used to some of what we got here, but it was a big change, and I don't know that Kelly was really used to it, but I think the Lord led us here, and so we started coming here. And we started having, we have meetings twice a year, and that was kind of new to me. We didn't ever had any meetings at the church I went to. I know one time some people asked that the last pastor that I had there to have a revival. And he told them, well, I can't have a revival. It's not me. If you want a revival, how about you pray and ask God to send a revival? And if He sends it to the church, I'll be glad to hold the meeting, but I'm not just going to have a revival. And it can be hard to think like that, to get a hold of when you don't really, if you don't know, if you've always went and it's been a routine and you do these things because they've always been done that way, you have to break that train of thought to get into seeking God for a revival. To really pray for a meeting and know that you're having this time we have a meeting. About to find out. In 2018 and 2019, we were coming to church here, but I was feeling kind of stuck. It seemed like everything I did, I couldn't be satisfied. It wasn't that anything was really that different. I was dissatisfied with everything. I didn't really like the direction that I was going in. Although things were really the same, but just something wasn't right. I needed something else. And so I listened to a lot of sermons. I listened to a lot of lectures. I listened to a lot of podcasts because I knew I was looking for something. And I come across Jordan Peterson. He's a Canadian psychologist and professor. And he says a lot of things, tries to help people get their life in order. That was one of his claim to fame things. And he had a lot of good information. And it's real good things you should do, and it would probably help everybody if they followed a lot of that. But every once in a while, he would talk about God. I thought that was interesting, because I don't think he's a very religious person, or wasn't then anyhow. I think he maybe is more religious now than he was. But I remember one time he was talking about, there was a clip on YouTube where someone was making fun of people praying to God who they can't see. And he was saying, that just shows their ignorance, because even though you can't see God and people pray to God, it works. And you can look back through history and see that when people ask for something, if they look towards God and they ask for something, that it's more likely to get it. And especially if you're asking for help for yourself. If you know you're in some place and you need help, and you look upward, or you don't have to look upward, but I mean, that's sort of the stereotypical thing people do, is you look upward and you ask for help. And it's kind of like all the things that pointed us here, you don't really see them as they come to you, but God sends you help if you ask for it. And I don't know why that stuck out in my mind, because that's all that prayer is, and I knew that. But it really stuck in my mind. And so I started to pray more. I started to sort of ask God to help me find direction. And I always thought I was saved, because I always believed the Bible. I never questioned it. People tell you, well, if you believe in Jesus, then you're saved. And so that's what I thought. And all this stuff was just sort of swirling around in my head. And I remember it was Power Conference in 2020. And I really had that on my mind. I was looking for some direction. And I thought, well, this, I actually prayed quite a bit about the Power Conference, and I was looking for something when I came here. And I remember Ralph Sexton Jr. was preaching that night, but one night he couldn't preach. He had to be somewhere else. And Heath Williams came and preached. And he preached a message titled, Almost Persuaded, but Altogether Lost. And he talked about King Agrippa hearing the case of the Apostle Paul, and how that Paul had told him that the coming of Christ was the fulfillment of the prophets. That's what they prophesied about. Then he asked Agrippa if he believed the prophets, but he knew that Agrippa did, because he answered for him. He said, I know you believe. And then Agrippa said, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. And I thought, am I like King Agrippa? He had all the knowledge. He knew the prophets, and he believed the prophets. But he was missing something, because he wasn't saved. And so that was really on my mind a lot. And the next day I was sitting in my car at lunch at work. I was thinking about all that, and a verse came in my mind. And it's an odd verse. It says, if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, my children, I will not go free. Then his master shall bring him unto the judges, and shall also bring him to the door, or to the doorpost. And his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. And I didn't really understand what it meant, but I knew it meant something, and I was wrestling with that. I thought, it's got to be another piece of the puzzle. And the next night, we came to the power conference, and Ralph Sexton preached, and at the altar call, he said, I believe someone might be a bond servant who needs that mark. Things just don't line up that perfect for no reason. That's a pretty obscure verse. I mean, most people would just pass that over. I had read it sometime. It stuck in my head. It came out the day before while I was at lunch. You know, I wasn't reading that section. I don't know how long it had been in there, but that really tore me up. But I didn't really know what to do with it. It seems pretty obvious when I'm telling you all these things, what you should do with that. But it was not obvious to me. And so that was the last night of that meeting. And I didn't come up here, and like I say, I was just tore up, and I was tore up for a few weeks. That really messed with my mind. But then, you know, you get back into daily routine, and I really think these meeting times are special. You get special privileges then that you don't get at other times. And I think that's why my mind was working so much. You know, everybody in here was praying. I was praying some, but, you know, not like I should have been. But the effort of all these people going into this meeting, somehow that power gets just spread around to everybody. And so after a few weeks, that sort of died down, and I felt better, and I felt, well, you know, maybe I just need to do better. I know I'm not doing as good as I could be doing. I'll do better. And I did feel better. And that all the way up until we had Camp Victory. And I was really feeling better when we were going into it. I prayed a lot for that meeting. We set the tent up that time. I come and helped set the tent up. We didn't actually get to have services in the tent. I thought, you know, I come up here, I helped, I did something, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I felt pretty good the whole meeting. I felt like I was getting stuff from it. I was getting instruction that I needed until that Friday night. And I was supposed to go to a wedding that Friday night. There's a friend of mine that I worked with was getting married. And I debated on going. I thought, well, you know, I probably need to go to this meeting because I am trying to do better. You know, I'm trying to do what I need to do at church. And so I came, and Heath got up, and he preached, and he started preaching, and it was the same message. And to be honest with you, I thought, I've sort of wasted my time. I've already heard this message. I could have been going to that wedding and being with my friend, but I came here and I heard a repeat. I heard a repeat message. I've already heard it. And I probably wasn't all that interested in it in the beginning. But by the time he got to the end, I was captivated by it. And all those feelings came back, but this time I knew. I knew that I was Agrippa. I knew the things I needed to know, but I wasn't saved. And I remember standing up in the pew, but I don't really remember getting out of the pew. I remember going up. I got up. I made it up about 2 or 3 pews, and then I realized what I was doing. And in my mind, I just stopped. I was thinking, I can't go up there. I just wanted to run away. I wanted to run out the back door and into the car, and I wanted to leave. But I didn't leave, and somehow I made it up here. And I think I don't think I actually even stopped walking on the way up here, but that moment that I realized was a crossroads. And I think about it like this. In every movie you ever see, when someone sells their soul to the devil, it's at a crossroads. I was at a crossroads in my life, and my soul was in the balance. If I'd have walked out that door, I don't know if I'd have got that chance again. I could have. God is plenteous in mercy. He could have given me that chance again. I'd undoubtedly have had that chance many times, but I couldn't see it. And if you turn it down when you can see it, that's a dangerous thing. So I made my way up to the altar, and the pastor came, and he gave me some verses. And, you know, there's certain verses that go along with someone that you think is searching for salvation. And I knew them. And it's like, I knew that I was lost, but I kind of didn't, or I didn't want to admit it. And I couldn't fully grasp it. And I think the pastor asked, is Christ a liar? I think he asked me that. If he didn't ask me that, I heard that. And then it was like on repeat. Is Christ a liar? No. Is he a liar? No. I just kept saying that in my head. No, he's not. And then it was almost like Christ himself said, am I a liar? And you better answer that one. I said, no. And I felt all that pent-up energy it was gone. It was like all my energy was gone. I was so weak, I could stand up, but it was like I had no energy to do anything. And the only thing I can compare that to is if you see like a war movie and you see a bomb come in and it lands next to a guy, and then the whole screen will go silent. You know, all the action's still going on around him, but you don't hear any of it. He's in shock. It's just surreal. You look around and everything's going on, but it's like you're not really there. And it was like that. That was a Friday night, and it was like that until Sunday morning. I thought, that's some real power, real power. But on Saturday, the Saturday after I got saved, I was doing some work outside, and I was thinking about it. And it's like I say, it was almost like I wasn't with myself, you know. I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, so what exactly happened? And I had a thought in my mind that said, you know, you didn't really get saved up there last night. You went up there, but you didn't even pray anything. You didn't even pray a prayer. And I didn't pray a prayer. And I thought, you know, is that true? Did I not get saved last night? And as I thought about it, it was almost like the Lord said to me, it wasn't last night that you got saved. I saved you from the foundations of the world. And that's when I really got that confirmation. Like I knew something had happened, but I couldn't say exactly what. But that's when I really knew. And so, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a miracle that we even got to this church. You know, and it's a miracle we even know it existed, much less got here. But the real miracle was when God saved my soul. All those things to point me to one night, one moment in time, one step. If I'd have turned around and went out that door, Who knows? So I hope that helps somebody. If you ever get that chance and you ever know, if you know that it is that chance, better make the right decision. I'm glad I did. I don't know if I would have got another chance or not.
Amen. Thank you, Brother Andy, for your testimony. What a blessing that is. I just remember, I remember when I was at the crossroads. I remember that night when God said, "You're lost." I heard it, not with my ears, but with my heart. It was so real. I thank God for that. Thank God He made it real to me, because I thought I was saved. I thought I was saved when I was a kid. And I thought that I just got away from God and I'd come back. But that night, February 28th, 2014, it'll be 10 years in a few days. Thank you, Brother Andy. Thank you for sharing that, because it just made it real in my heart. And I thank God that He can speak to you and make it real like that. And everyone has their own testimony. And I thank God that it doesn't have to be like everyone else's, but there is some similarities that have to be there. And He sure spoke to my heart, and I know that I'm saved, because He's still with me. He hasn't left me.